So I finally figured out how to try and make a tool to take the head bolts out. These are not standard at all. I theoretically could have used a pin wrench, adjustable pin wrench, but I wasn't sure that was going to be strong enough because I wasn't sure how tight these were. So I managed to find a piece of metal that I was going to try with. First I tried with cardboard, as you saw. Then I tried to move that from cardboard to wood and then get that in the metal. And drilled holes, and that worked. I really like that cross slide setup. That makes it much easier to get fairly precise holes. And then work and tap it, and that did good. And then I had the bolts, and because I need pins, not threads, I filed off the ends of the bolts as, to use as pins. And then the plan is put them down through, and then I realized I needed nuts to lock it in. But then that worked, and here you go. I was shocked and amazed. That worked perfect. And not only on the first one, it worked on the other ones. And it's about 9 inches long, and I had just enough leverage to get it and loosen them all up. So there's the first one out. And then I realized I really should move the other table to get the other one. Get the blades out and flip it over, and it worked on the other one too. There's basically almost no play, so I did good with the bolts, and yeah, that's very cool. Very, very cool. Well, that worked. I wasn't sure if that was gonna. I didn't have, because I do wood projects, so I don't really have a whole lot of steel anywhere that I haven't already used for stuff. This piece was the brace that came with the jointer that they had to hold the motor on the original piece of board. And I figured, well, it's not ideal, but I'll try it. So as you saw, took a piece of cardboard, made some holes. Then I drilled that in wood and tested with smaller bolts. And that seemed like it would fit. And then I used the wood to make marks on here, drilled it out, and you notice those aren't straight because the bolts ended up not being quite right because of the cardboard, so I had to splay them out slightly. But with nuts, like these were just extra bolts I had. This was one of the original that was holding the tables together. So that's reused from the joiner. This is reused from the joiner. This was just one I had laying around. They're 3/8 16 bolts. And I just did some nuts to lock it in. And that actually worked. I filed off the threads, and that fit right in the bolts. The bolts look good. I mean, there's a little bit of sawdust in, but the threads all look fine. They don't look stretched at all. They're really heavy duty. So you'd have to crank the crap out of that to stretch it. But the threads don't look stretched on any of the bolts. And that's the big worry on these, that if they're stretched, you can't reuse it and you got to get new stuff. So the good news is I should hopefully, I'm not going to jinx it, but I should hopefully be able to reuse these just fine. Like clean them up a little bit. And that should be just fine. And the way this works, there's little slots in the blades, and for whatever reason, it says Nelson on it. I don't know if that's I'm guessing that's one of the people who originally owned this. But there's these little tabs that stick up that the blades fit down on, and that gives you your locked in. So when this cap clamps down over and puts pressure on it, these help keep the blades from just flying out, which is good. Because you don't want to just have the caps too loose and the blade flies out. This way, it would have to actually bend and break that 3/16 maybe metal. I doubt it's going to do that. I think I have spare blades. Supposedly I do. The guy who was helping me get this all packed up and ready to go when I bought it, he said, hey, I think these blades might go with your joiner. So he wrapped them up in paper, so I'll have to go see. Well, it says Mark Nelson on, and these are the blades all wrapped up, so I I haven't looked at these since I got it. So I'm hoping these are new. They look new. They're still in goo. So I'm guessing that was what they did. Oh yeah, those look razor sharp. So I'm guessing this is just how whoever sharpened them or whatever locked them together, or maybe the person who did it locked them together like that. But that's cool. All right, so I have new blades. So the plan is get this cleaned up, try and put the new blades in, clean the bolts up. They don't look stretched at all. They're super heavy duty bolts. The threads look good. Nothing looks stretched. So that's awesome. And the best part is, this is, like you saw, I could just, it was at the point of pull, 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 and it opened. So this is about how tight they were. So that's good. I can't go too tight with this because there's only so much leverage that this handmade thing will do. And this worked. That's awesome. And I used up stuff I already had, which is even better. So, very cool. All right. Well, now I get to play with the new blades and get those all adjusted. So that's good. I didn't want to get further on this because with fighting, I still have to finish fighting with the bearings. But I didn't want to get further and finish the bearings and then realize that I either could not get the head apart or the head was ruined because these bolts were all stretched and screwed up. And then I still wouldn't have been able to use the joiner. This way, I'm as confident as someone who hasn't dealt with this style stuff before can be. I'm pretty confident that those are fine. So as long as I tighten it back up like it was with this, I don't think it'll have an issue. The cap of the bolt hits this step, and then this piece, it hits on the blade itself. So it's a lever between this outside edge and the blade when it's in that slot. So it's like that. So when the bolt comes down through, that puts pressure on the fact that the blade is sticking out, and so it's pulling down between those things. So I guess you theoretically could over crank it, but you'd have to put an awful lot of pressure on, and based on what I can see here, that didn't happen. It wasn't over cranked. Like, if it was over cranked, I would not have been able to open it with something that only had this amount of leverage. Because that's only like 9 inches long. And yes, I was pulling on it, but 9 inches is not a whole lot of leverage on something that's that size with that style bolts. So I think we're good. Yay! I'm so happy about that. I was worried about this for months, that I wasn't going to be able to figure out how to get those out, but I got it out, so cool. Now to clean stuff up. So I soaked the bolts and the plates that came off in Evaporust for a couple hours. There we go. It is run through Evaporust. I'll probably run over this one, and maybe the heads of this as well, with the die grinder. But that cleaned up all the rust, so that's good. Very cool. So I cleaned the pieces off with the die grinder, and the top of the bolts and the round parts of the heads. And then I realized I should probably, since it's all cleaned off and could flash rust, I decided to put paste wax on it. I didn't put it under the top part. I did make the mistake of putting it the whole way around the head initially, but then realized that and then cleaned all that off because you don't want that part to slip. That part's supposed to grip. So this should be good.